by Izant. We normally broadcast from the inner harbor of downtown Baltimore, but today we're in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm with my wife, Susan. I have my good friend George here. His wife Stephanie's with him. Both of our spouses will make appearances later on in the show, but for right now, it's just myself and George. As you can see, we're on an active street, so you're going to see people walking by. You'll hear cars in the background, because Buenos Aires is a hustling, bustling city of roughly about 3 million in its central core, and another, what, George, 14 million around
another 11 or 12 million around that.
Right, so it's a big city. So, George, we've been here a couple of days. What's your first impressions of the city?
It seemed a lot like Paris, Madrid to me.
Okay, and then why did it seem like Paris and Madrid?
I think it's the architecture of the homes, particularly in the area that we're staying, the built up probably in the late 18th, 19th century, and also in the 20th century, but with homes that mirror a lot of the architecture of France, particularly Paris.
You mentioned the Recoleta. There's Buenos Aires is comprised of a number of neighborhoods. Can you describe some of the others that we visited in the last couple of days?
Well, Tel Amo, where we went, San Telmo rather, where we went to see some tango last night, and for dinner we went to the Boca, which is where the Boca Juniors soccer team has its field, and we've also gone through the Palmero district, mainly residential area. The one area we've missed is the Micro Centro, which is the downtown business area, which we hope to see this afternoon.
Argentine people have been described to us as primarily, or a lot of Italian heritage, who speak Spanish, although your average Buenos Aires will say it's not Spanish, it's what, it's Castilian?
Castillo is what they would call it, but I've had more luck understanding the Spanish spoken here in Argentina than I have in Mexico City, so something about the pronunciation that it's made it a little easier for me to pick up the few verbs and nouns that I know.
Well, when George and I do travel together, we rely a lot on nouns, sometimes verbs.
Right. Our problem is telling whether something's going to happen tomorrow or did it happen yesterday.
That's exactly right. So I was repeating just a little bit, sort of a joke about the average person who lives here in Buenos Aires, that they have an Italian heritage. They speak Castilian, and but they think like the French.
I think that's true. They probably were trying to mirror themselves on what was going on in Europe. Certainly the big opera house for them was a sign that they had made it in the 20th century, that they could be considered a modern city. So, as with the U.S., always looking back to the mother country or countries and emulating what was going on there. I think you see a lot of that in Argentina.
A lot of our viewers, if they think of Argentina, probably think of the famous beef from the Pampas.
That's right. Yeah, we went out the other night, obviously, to a parrilla, I believe is how they pronounce it, or a barbecue, steak barbecue house, and it was amazing the number of cuts that were on there, some of which I didn't recognize at all, but we finally settled on a T-bone steak, and it was just delicious. So they know how to do their steak.
Yours was about the size of a pickup truck, as I recall.
Just short, one of the smaller pickup trucks, but yes, and it took 2 people to put it on my plate.
So it was. So we're having a great time here in Buenos Aires. We are going to be going to other cities during this show: Córdoba, Mendoza, El Calafate. A little later, George and I are then probably going to do some trekking in Patagonia. So we've got a great show, maybe even a couple of shows coming up. One of the things that Argentina is famous for is, of course, Eva Perón. Many of you are familiar with the song "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina," which was written for the opera Evita, and also the movie which starred Madonna.
Correct. It was a movie I liked, and I enjoyed that song in particular, but I understand that it wasn't so well received here in Buenos Aires. Of course, she's an icon for for them, so it's doubtful that anybody else could treat her in the fashion that they would like to see her treated here in Argentina. But I thought it was an interesting film. I never did see the play.
She was very young when she passed away, only 33 years of age of cancer. She was married to Juan Perón from, 1946 to 52, 53?
It's surprising how big a deal she is for the number of years that she was actually on the public scene. And reading the paper this morning, I saw her name mentioned several times in connection with, I'm not quite sure what. But she is clearly a major force today in Argentina.
She was the wife of President Juan Perón, who was president for 2 terms in Argentina, starting in 1946. In the movie, she's most famous for standing on the balcony of a large building called Casa Rosada, which is because it's made from a pink type of granite. We're going to see that later in the show, as well as we're going to go to the Cementerio
Recolata, where she's buried, yes.
It's actually right behind us, but we're going to do that in a moment. But first we have to take a break, so please stay with us. Don't go away. We'll be right back. All right, here we are in the Cementerio. We're on the hunt for Evita Perón. We have our map. We know she's number 26, but there's a lot of narrow alleyways. And as you can see, there's some very interesting tombs. So we're on the hunt for Evita. But we're also going to look at some of the interesting architecture in this cemetery. Here at the crossroads of the cemetery, there's 6 different ways that you can go. But we're going that way because we think that's where Evita Perón is buried. Come on with us. Well, we're here now at the tomb of Eva Duarte. Because it's a very narrow area and very crowded, I actually can't stand in front of the tomb just because, as you can see, there's quite a few people passing by. But it's a good-sized monument. There are a number of plaques on either side of the door praising her role and what she did for the descamasitos, which means the shirtless ones. So she was a tireless advocate for the poor, partially because I think she came from a poor family, and also because she believed it was good politics for the power base for her husband, President Juan Perón. So this is it. The family Duarte is the name of the tomb, but and both Eva Duarte and Juan Perón are there. Eva Perón, interestingly enough, after her husband was disposed from power, her body was removed and sent to Spain, where it was there for quite a few years before the Peronistas, as the political party was known, came back into power, and was able to then have her body brought back from Spain. So next we're going to Casa Rosada, which was where she made her famous speech, and in the musical or the movie, it's where she sings the song Don't Cry for Me Argentina, which of course Eva Perón herself actually did not do. So coming up next, Casa Rosada. Okay, we're in front of the tomb of Rufina Cambraceres. This is the young lady that supposedly was buried alive. Perhaps she was only in a coma, but after she was buried, grave workers heard her scratching and pounding on her coffin to get out. So we understand she made it out successfully, but her mother, so that would never happen again, had this memorial there with her opening the door to make sure that people can get out alive if they're indeed still alive. So on now to Casa Rosada. Thank you. Well, we just came from the cemetery where we saw Eva Duarte's tomb. Behind us is the Casa Rosada, so named because it was built around the turn of the century with rose-colored limestone. This, though, was the center of Juan and Eva Perón's political power. You see a small balcony behind me to my right, your left. This is where Juan Perón and Eva Duarte would come out and stand in the square here. It was very loud microphone. Political power was that she did a lot of good works for the old and for the poor. She called her poor people descamasitos, which means the shirtless subway system here in Buenos Aires. It was the fourth subway in the Americas, built after New York, Philadelphia, and I forget which the third one was, but the fourth one was here in Buenos Aires. So we're going to take a look. They still have some of the original wooden cars. So coming up next, life on the subway in Buenos Aires. This is Buenos Aires' oldest subway. These cars are made out of wood. This was the fourth subway in all of the Americas, North and South America. So let's go inside and take a look at the wood paneling. Quite different, of course, than the metro that we have in D.C. We're inside one of the wooden subway cars here in Buenos Aires, and you can see that it is made out of wood. I'll also tell you that it is un-air conditioned, which right now Buenos Aires is having their summer. It's kind of like ours. It's a little humid. Temperatures are in the high 80s or the low 90s. And in this case, now that you're underground, it's really hot. But it's a wooden subway car, and you just don't see any of those these days. So we're getting ready to go. You can see the young lady fanning herself. Fans are very popular down here this time of year. My friend George in the lower left of the screen. Right now we're focusing on the young lady with the fan. George is thinking he wishes that he had one. But we're just about to go. You've heard the bells ring. We're going to move. There's the whistle. Doors are closing, manually by hand, not automatically like the metro. And off we go. Well, just want to let you know there are some differences between the metro in Washington, D.C. and down here in Buenos Aires. Here you can bring small furry animals like the dog that young lady is holding. So we haven't seen any cats yet, but you can bring a dog if you want to on the metro in Buenos Aires. We got off one stop too early, so we're going to have to get back on and go to the next stop so that we can transfer to line C. Alright, so George is looking at the map. We're going to catch the train, and we have to take it 2 more stops so that we can transfer over. So we're trying to figure it out. The maps look pretty much like the ones do on Metro, just a little different. Just have to get used to it. But we're doing fine. I don't think there's any air conditioning in this station either, though. Alright, here comes our next train. More of those wooden coaches. These coaches have been running since around the turn of the century. So let's get aboard. Alright, we're still here, top of the morning. This is the city of Cordoba. Yesterday was a transition day for us. We took the bus from Buenos Aires to Cordoba, about an 11-hour trip. 2 hours longer than it needed to be, but we're here. We're traveling west towards the Andes. This is a city that has a weighty title. You recall it? It's the historic capital of the Americas, or culture?
Yeah, in 2006 it was declared the cultural capital of the Americas.
Which is a pretty big title for a city of only 1.2 million people.
Right, second largest city in Argentina, but it's at the top of their list of cities with colonial architecture still to be viewed. So what we've seen this morning is really very pleasant.
So we're in the Plaza San Martin, named after their famous liberator. And the church behind us, George, tell us a little bit about that.
That's the Cathedral Iglesia, and it was started in 1577 by the Jesuits. Architects changed over the centuries, took a couple hundred years to build, finally finished by the Franciscans in 1777 or thereabouts, and stood here ever since and is the active central cathedral for Cordoba now.
So we're going to go and take a look inside. We understand part of it may be under construction, but having left the Cathedral de San Martin, we're back out in San Martin Square, and here is a statue commemorating General San Martin. 1810 is their revolution when they revolted against Spanish rule and became independent. And San Martin San Martin. through the Mercado, or perhaps more aptly, Tourist Square, but there are a lot of locals here. You can see it's kind of crowded, but it's really interesting. There's lots of things to buy, lots of things to see. So in this Mercado right now in Cordova, we're having a lot of fun. Please stay with us. More coming up. Highest hill in Cordova. This area of Argentina is very flat, but what hills there are behind us and below us. In the background you can see some clouds that are coming in. It's possible that we're going to have a very rainy day tomorrow, and that may be interrupting our plans because we had planned to take you for a tour of the countryside outside of Cordova. So we'll just have to see. You'll know in a few moments, so please stay with us. We're looking at the ceiling of the Church of the Iglesia. As you can see, it is elaborately designed and painted. In a moment you'll see some scaffolding. Interestingly, the refurbishment is being paid for by the government of Cordova as opposed to the church.
Oh my God, that's right. It's just there. Mendoza. Yes, we're heading there.
So we're going to continue our tour of the church in just another segment. This is the right side of the main area of the church. It's also very elaborately painted and decorated. We're going to pan down here just briefly so that you can see the elaborate and beautiful design. Again, at the far end, you'll see the draping. We can't go any further than that because of the refurbishment by the Cordova government. We're inside the Jesuit church now. This altar was designed by a Belgian whose last name was Lemaire. He evidently did not have the tools or the craftsmen that he needed, as well as the gold, so he traveled to Paraguay, which is a country north of Argentina, and it took him some 20 years to bring back the men, materials, and the gold that you see now in this altar today. We're learning more on our tour as we go along. The last cathedral that we saw was designed and built under the auspices of the Franciscans. This one here was done by the Jesuits. Also started in around 1601. Work was partially halted in 1640, but then continued a number of decades later. This church was limited to people who spoke Spanish. It's Sunday night in downtown Cordova. We are at the largest mall in the city. You see the exterior behind me. That exterior actually was built around 1850. And what they've done here as a way of historic preservation is to leave the facade or front of the building and to then deck the backside. So this is Cordova's largest mall. It's Sunday, it's almost 10 o'clock. You can see that the square is crowded with people. I realize the noise and the cars behind makes this a little tough to hear. We'll wait until that motorcycle finishes revving. We're going to go inside to take a look at the food court. Alright, now the motorcycle's finally left. I hope you can hear me a little bit. We're going to go inside to the food court. Rather than having a big full dinner, we're going to see what the average Argentinian in Cordova has in the food court. So, come on, join me inside. We're at the largest food court in Cordova. And you can see that you can get McDonald's. They don't have quite the same names for their burgers that they have in the States, but they look pretty much the same. There's also Burger King. And again, you can get a Whopper with cheese, but they don't call it a Whopper. But then you're going to see in this food court, and by the way, this is Sunday night at about 9:45. This really is a late night city. All those over there, pizza, salads, a variety of hoagie cheesesteaks, got some ice cream, hot dogs. So you can get it all. You just don't recognize the names here because these are all local brands. The only international brands, if you will, in this food court are McDonald's and Burger King. And again, this is 9:30 on a Sunday night. So this concludes our nighttime visit to Cordoba. So tomorrow morning we leave for Mendoza. It's about a 12-hour bus ride. See you tomorrow morning. We're about 2/3 of the way through our trip now to Mendoza. This is a bus stop whose name I don't know, but it seems to be an important city as there's a lot of folks getting on and a lot of folks getting off. The bus behind me is the bus that we've been traveling on. This is the main way of transportation around Argentina. Traveling by air is very expensive. Training system for passengers, some like the United States, perhaps somewhat like the United States, just because of the vast expanse of the country is not a practical form. So buses are a very popular mode of transportation. So we're going to have to get back on the bus. We're continuing on to Mendoza. All right, so we're back for just a short segment. I don't know if we can drink on cable TV, but this is a beer called Andes, and of course that's named after the Andes Mountains.
I like it.
In the United States, there's a very famous beer called Sierra Nevada, named after the Sierra Nevada mountains. But here we're trying to partake of the local culture, so we're not drinking Budweiser. We're going to have an Andes cerveza.
Auténtico sabor de los Andes.
All right.
Founded in 1921.
1921, and in Spanish you just said the authentic?
The authentic taste of the Andes.
The authentic taste of the Andes, probably brewed with pure mountain spring water that comes down from the glaciers on the Andes. So that concludes this segment, and again, please stay tuned for perhaps South America's dirtiest cars.
And the drunkest commentators.
All right, Loretta, you can probably edit that part out. We're on one of the main drags in Argentina, and we saw something that we thought might interest you. Now, if a car ever needed a car wash, this is the one. We don't know where this car's been. We don't know if the driver looks like the car, but this guy has certainly been in the outback of Argentina. So we've got more coming up. Please stay with us. All right, so this wasn't exactly the shopping that I had in mind, but I think this counts as shopping. That's my wife Susan on the left. She's trying to bargain or negotiate a price. Now, you can do that in Tijuana, but they don't seem to deal in Mendoza, but she's trying to strike the best bargain that she can. Now, we'll get eventually to the shopping that I was talking about, but right now, this is street shopping. I should mention that Susan's friend Stephanie is inspecting. Hopefully we'll give her seal of approval so that Susan feels secure in what she's going to purchase. So if there's two things that Cordova does well, it's leather and silver. So here's Susan checking out a small carpet. Rug is perhaps a better idea. And she actually made this home and frame it and put it on the wall. So we're going to get some help in just a moment, but meanwhile, let's take a look and see what else there is to see here in this shop. Sterling silver frames. Got some boots up above. One woman admiring another woman's potential purchase. Leather belts. It smells like leather.
Nosotros lo colgamos a veces en las paredes como adorno. Gracias, igualmente. No sabes cómo quedarte, eso es todo. Very difficult work.
All right, so we're going to make a purchase.
Very nice. Yeah. Which
This is
one is your favorite?
198 pesos, or based on the exchange rate, about $47.
Maybe this one.
But
It's with leather.
maybe there's one more purchase to be made. We're not sure here yet, but those silver frames are made in Argentina as well.
Yeah, this is.
So our shopping spree in this little store continues.
Very beautiful. So for.
All right, it's nighttime. We're in Durango Square in San Antonio. It's a suburb of Buenos Aires. You can hear some jazz in the background. Coming up, we have tango dancers. You're going to love what you see. So please stay with us. This is top of the morning. Please stay with us for tango dancers coming up in San Antonio Square in Buenos Aires. before we get to the tango dancing, a little bit about nightlife in Argentina. People eat dinner late here. You're going to dinner early if you're eating by 9 o'clock. That means they stay up late. We took a tour early this morning. And the tour group later talked about one of the most popular places. It doesn't open until 2 in the morning and then closes at 8. So we're still in Dorrego Square. It's a cafe society type of night. It's a little on the humid side. While we're having winter in Maryland, it's summer down here in Buenos Aires. So we're waiting for the tango dancers and the small backup group to appear. We're still listening to the music at the other end of the square. We're hoping, of course, that he'll stop playing when our tango dancers start.
Teniendo en cuenta